Welcome back as we take a live look from Rome. Blue skies there as crowds of thousands are right now gathering in St. Peter's Square to mourn together the loss of Pope Francis, who died overnight on this Easter Monday at the age of 88. The bell has already tolled. They're indicating the death of Pope Francis. Although there will be no public events surrounding his death, people are already, again, starting to gather there. There are going to be, I believe, 9 days of mourning
That's
here.
correct, and that begins, I believe, today. And then during that time, a funeral will be planned and held. And then the College of Cardinals will meet to select a new pope.
The conclave.
That's right. The news of the Pope's passing devastating to the faithful and millions around the world who felt encouraged by his leadership.
Many people welcomed his inclusive style, progressive style compared to other more traditional popes. We are joined by Stephen Millies, who is a professor with the Catholic Theological Union. Stephen, thank you so much for joining the program this morning. We appreciate it. How are you, first off, just reacting to this news?
Well, it's a very sad time, of course, and yet I'm also struck by a feeling of intense gratitude for the life of this pastor and this global leader. The Roman Catholic, in fact, I would say, feels a certain amount of joy in this moment for Pope Francis, who now has the reward that he earned in life.
Talk a little bit about his legacy. Some label him as a controversial pope. Certainly there was pushback to his progressive views, but that was, I believe, all a means to an end to help more people feel that they were a part of the Catholic Church. Talk a little bit about what that legacy will hold.
Well, I'm one who rejects and doesn't sort of like to use words like conservative or liberal or progressive or traditional when we talk about things like this. I think they conceal a lot, and yet I think you're quite right. Pope Francis certainly has stirred a certain kind of opposition among Roman Catholics, particularly in the United States, but around the world. In large part, it's because of some of the things you've already talked about that Anthony mentioned in his introduction. Pope Francis's emphasis has been pastoral. His emphasis has been on accompanying people on their difficult journeys through human life. Doctrine is a part of that, but his emphasis has been more the focus of a pastor than his emphasis has been the focus of a teacher, which is what we have seen really for the last 40 or 50 years, more typically in occupants of the Holy See.
Do you feel like, Stephen, that he had an influence on policy? I know that he, this was years ago, but said, you know, in reference to, for example, gay and lesbian members of the Catholic Church, who am I to judge?
Yeah, I think, you know, in terms of, so that's a doctrinal question, right? That's a question about church teaching. And Pope Francis certainly has not changed Pope teaching on that subject. But this goes back to what I said a moment ago. It really is a matter of how Pope Francis has shifted the emphasis from reciting doctrine to accompanying people. We know that LGBTQ plus persons are in the church, they're in the world, and they need the comfort that the church offers. Pope Francis has opened the door to welcome people rather than make them feel unwelcome, to make them feel as though they're not worthy of the church's attention. Pope Francis gave a consistent message that every human person matters infinitely, and that is the thing that matters most.
Pope Francis just yesterday called for a ceasefire in Gaza. Stephen, do you think that those words will still hold the same amount of strength despite his passing?
Lord, I hope they will. And may Pope Francis intercede for us on that question now, as he is closer to God than we are. I think it's very fitting in terms of how we've talked about this here to remember when Pope Francis became Pope, almost his first words to us were an invitation to prayer. The prayers that any second grader making their first communion would know. We said the Our Father, the Hail Mary, and the Glory Be together. His last words to us were, in his Urbi et Orbi message yesterday, that there is no peace without justice. I think there's no better way to understand Pope Francis than to understand him in terms of that bookend, those two bookends. A prayer that invites everyone, but a firm commitment to a more peaceful world that can only be peaceful when it is just.
Stephen, next up, you know, after this period of mourning, the conclave will convene to select his successor. What do you expect this to hold? I know that Pope Francis leaves this legacy of getting out into the world. He didn't just stay in Vatican City and let folks come to him. He was a huge environmentalist. Do you feel like it's going to be a continuation of that kind of legacy or a change of pace?
There's no question Pope Francis himself was the Pope of surprises. I'm not the first to say that, but I certainly agree with it. But he was a Pope of surprises because, and Roman Catholics would recognize this, he was a Pope of surprises because he listened to the Holy Spirit, who surprises us constantly. We've all seen movies about papal conclaves and the elections of popes, and there is a certain amount of human politicking that's involved in the process, I have no doubt. But I would never try to predict what comes next. I think the best way we can honor Pope Francis's memory is to recognize the Holy Spirit is always here to surprise us, and it's our job to be responsive to those surprises.
Stephen Millies, thank you for your insight this morning.
Nice to talk to you.